Just a quick mention again, Randy Staples will be joining us in 20 minutes from Idaho Weekly Briefing for our weekly chat with Randy. And then following the 9 o'clock news, Maxine Bell is scheduled to join us in studio. I'd like to pass along to some of you, too. Coming up Wednesday in our studio, Dr. Jonathan Tripp will join us once more. Dr. Tripp, of course, man behind Tripp Family Medicine right here in Twin Falls, located on Fillmore Street, directly across from the main post office. We've been telling you now for some months that they are still looking for new patients. Not many doctors' offices or family practices altogether in this community can make that offer. And they also would like to remind you, too, if you're a patient and you need to see one of the medical professionals right away, generally they can get you in on that very same day, and if not, at the latest, the following day. So just a reminder, we'll be talking with him. We'll have a medical topic this coming Wednesday. He's also available to take your telephone calls, really on any medical issue that may be driving you up the wall. I know I have a few of those. That's Better Health with Tripp Family Medicine. And remember, life's too short not to feel good. 25 minutes after 8 o'clock, Bill Colley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Not geographically, I guess, too far away from us is a raging forest fire. Call it a brush fire if you like, or a wildfire, depending on where it happens to be burning right now. Did you see the stories last week about this fire rather in Alberta? That the smoke from that fire was reaching all the way down into Georgia and northern Florida. The way the wind was blowing, it was taking it down there. That you had overcast cities, Georgia cities. Many of them, they initially looked like cloud cover, but it happened to be the smoke in the air just because of the size of that fire going on in Alberta. Now, the good news is this morning firefighters believe that they have a good handle on it and they may be bringing it to an end. 80,000 people, though, have been so far evacuated. And I was listening over the weekend to some of these people talk, and you know what? It is just literally gut-wrenching.
I was so scared. There was kids crying, moms crying, trying to get their kids in cars.
All I thought is, dear Lord, if you can get my children safe, then I don't care.
So I was reading up some of the stories this morning on this, and at least we may not hear much more of this grief, although when people go back, they will have a lot to deal with. And a lot of them may not go back because it is a very remote place that they happen to be living, and they may just decide to throw in their lot somewhere else. But one of the liberal writers that I came across at the Daily, was it Daily? No, was at Real Clear Politics. That's where it was. One of the liberal writers said, this, of course, is because of global warming. Well, climate change is the word she happened to use. Folks, I'm not really old, but I've been around a while now. I think that once you pass 50, you're qualified to talk as an old timer, and you're qualified to offer some of the experiences you've already had in your life. So I'm coming up on my 54th birthday here in a few months, and as far back as I can remember, television news has been around since I was born. As far back as I can remember, there have been forest fires that have been taking place throughout, well, North America, really around the world. And I've been reading about them in newspapers. I've heard the radio reports, as you've just heard there. These things didn't just start yesterday. I remember watching, I was just a little boy, and if we were good, we were allowed to stay up late and watch Lassie. And I can remember Lassie and Corey were out in the middle of a forest fire, and Lassie had to rescue all of these people and do that. But every time there is an event like this, all of a sudden lefties start screaming it's human activity. May well have been human activity that got it started. We don't know. I'm going to go with lightning. There were a lot of storms in the area. But it just shows you how incredibly out of touch they are. And they benefit because people don't have any historical, how shall we put it, memories at this point. 828, you're up next. You're on the air with Bill Colley on Top Story.
Yes, you're right. People don't know the history. They don't know what used to be. In the 60s and 70s, grazing was a common practice, and it was, everybody benefited. And there was never a problem with spawning of fish or anything like this. It was all just so-called made up because there really is no data that says that there was a problem. But you see, as time has went on, things are so skewed that nobody knows what really is what happened, what was truth. And it's such a shame because again, when we lose these forests, you and I will never see them the same again in our lifetime. And especially if they're privately owned, and these people that lose their private forest stocks, and nobody wants to compensate them for a fire that nobody wants to take, responsibility for.
Yeah.
And so, you see, in the end, you and I get the hell kicked out of us, and then in the meantime, the government's trying to decide who's responsible, whether or not they're going to compensate you. And see, somehow we have got to evict these people out of our lives, but it's like a tick. It's going to be impossible to get rid of it. I'll see you.
Thank you. Yeah, liberals and ticks. I see a resemblance. Instead of progressives, which they like to be called, maybe we could all start referring to them as ticks. 8:30. Bill Colley with you this morning on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. Quick note, as I said earlier, Randy Staples will be joining us at about 8:45 this morning. It's 8:30. It's 49. On our way only to about 60 before the day is out. Here's a thought. There's a lot of discussion going on lately about a third-party candidate running in this year's elections. How about Pat McCrory, governor of North Carolina, who just this morning told the federal government to stuff it? They're trying to force him to rescind a law in his state that says if you're a grown man, you cannot use the little girl's potty. And so he's told the federal government and the Obama White House where they can go. Bill Colley with you this morning on Top Story on News Radio 1310 KLIX, newsradio1310.com. It's 8:34, 49. On our way maybe to 60 today, but really summer-like at the end of the week. I do want to tell you in about a week and a half, we're going to be joined on air by Dr. Eric F. Jones. He's a local doctor working, in fact, just a few blocks away from us. The man has an incredible background. He's got a degree not only in chiropractic, but the doctor as well works with all sorts of various, holistic medicine. That is, he could help you if you have certain dietary issues. Sometimes just a quick change in diet can be all you need, number one, to stabilize not just physical health, but your mental health. I need to add to that he's also a family and marriage counselor, and perhaps sometimes just a change in your diet, if that improves your overall health, well-being, and your mood, likely will improve your family relationships. So what I'd like to do is recommend that you give him a telephone call if you have a need in some of those areas. His number is 731-7178. That's Dr. Eric F. Jones. His telephone number is 731-7178. We were talking about how liberals rewrite history for their own benefit. Do want to point out, I've seen just story after story about it today, although it's got to come to an end sometime. When do we say enough? Some people already have, and they're backing Trump, but we'll get to that end of it in the next hour. We have a caller with us. You're up next with Bill Colley on Top Story on KLIX.
Yeah, good morning, Bill. PBS just recently ran a special several nights on the national parks, and it was really interesting that they keep saying, well, we want to make sure that this public land and these parks are accessible to the people. Well, unfortunately, then they started using the Antiquities Act and also wilderness areas, which only elitists or people have time to backpack or have a lot of bankroll that they can fly over in a helicopter or whatever to enjoy any of these lands. So it's a matter of just taking the lands away from the access of the people. I had a friend that reason a lot of the fires are so bad, not only the introduction of the wolves, which the elk and so forth used to keep the meadows pretty well trimmed down so that you had a fire break. They were putting in tank traps so that it makes it impossible to fight these fires on federal land. And this is why we have such devastating fires, more so on federal land than we do on state, because you can't get any ground equipment in there except a pick and a shovel and a ground crew, and then kind of just spit on it from the air. So this is all part of Agenda 21. They failed to mention anything about the devastating Yellowstone fire in '88, which if they hadn't got in there to fight the thing, there wouldn't have been a Yellowstone Lodge. There would be nothing. Yellowstone would be totally barren of trees. Of course,
Sure.
It's grown back now. But anyway, it's just this Agenda 21 is just, government run amok.
And I thank you for the input, too, as well. Just a quick note, as long as we're talking national parks, if you get a chance this morning, I don't know. Okay, I don't know why you would. Pravda on the Potomac, Washington Post. I'll tell you about it then. There is a story where the writer is whining about corporate sponsorships of national parks. I talked about this last week. You know what? If you don't want to be taxed to death and a corporation comes along and says it'll help sponsor the parks, well, of course, the writer is just beside herself because corporations obviously are bad. So national parks getting involved with corporations are bad because corporate leaders sit around late at night plotting ways to come and get you. Corporations are bad. So we can't have any corporate input in how national, they would not have the input in how they were run, but they would help pay some of the costs, maintenance costs, maybe even clearing costs, because as our caller pointed out, when man managed these forests and managed them well, we didn't have some of the massive devastating fires. It's only when someone says, no, you can't touch that. And on another quick note, Mother Nature is a far bigger threat to anything that man can ever pose. And I cite this because over the last couple of weeks, I just read this over the weekend. If you didn't know it, there have been numerous, sometimes scores of them per day, 30 or 40 per day, earthquakes taking place underneath Mount St. Helens. What does that mean? It means the lava dome is reforming. Does that mean we'll have another cataclysmic eruption? No. Maybe a small one at some point, sometime in the next 5 to 10 years. But if you recall, I was just talking with a friend about this over the weekend, 35 years ago this month, 36 now, when that thing went up, how devastating that was. No human being could do anything quite like that. People say, well, talk about nuclear weapons. Hey, I'll tell you what, that was just one blast from one mountaintop. And look at the devastation that wrought. And that's far worse. We have far more worries of these type of natural disasters wiping us off the planet than anything you or I are doing when we're driving or we're eating too many beans and they claim we're flatulent, whatever they claim that we're the terrible weeds who are choking off the earth. Baloney. Randy Staples, speaking of land sales and land, government land, Randy and I are going to spend some time talking about that in the next 20 minutes. He's on the way after the break right here on News Radio 1310 KLIX and newsradio1310.com. It's 50 this morning at News Radio 1310 KLIX.